This program was made possible in part by viewers like you. G'nashish Ha'a. Thank you.
Have a smile while we're doing this. All your families would love to see a smile like Belle.
Take just a minute if you want to write some notes down, if you want to just think in your head. But we'll just take a few silent minutes for you to think back to your first day and a moment that maybe you were able to just take a breath and remember why you were there.
So this is Canvas of Ani. This is a group of teachers who have met pretty much probably about monthly, maybe every 5 or 6 weeks, and they've been learning from different elders and knowledge bearers, but especially Ernestine Hayes has led this year's cohort, and the main director with the main director Amy Rautiainen, and they've collaborated to create a really enriching experience, learning more about place-based education right here in Southeast Alaska.
Learn from place, and place is here to teach us. And being place-based means understanding the community, the local history, the demographics, the process of colonization, which occurs everywhere and has occurred everywhere, and every community is different and has its own specific personality and its own specific needs and benefits, and to be part of the community is to be place-based. I'm Ernestine Hayes. I was born in Juneau, in the Juneau Indian Village in downtown Juneau in 1945 at the end of the Second World War. Western education is one of the prongs of colonialism, and we've all been educated in the same way by Western-based teaching, which is more general and broader, and we've been taught so many attitudes, and we've been taught histories that are either incomplete or just wrong, and we need to rid ourselves of those teachings that we receive not only in the education system but throughout our lives from the beginning, through media, through news, through leaders, everything. It teaches us some wrong messages about how important place is, how important diversity is. Diversity is taught by the land, and to learn from the land such lessons as diversity and the cycle of life and interconnection and reciprocity. Those are lessons that we have all around us to take advantage of. And every place is different. Every place has its own needs, its own history, and its own lessons to learn. And we have people answering a call to Alaska, and many times they come here with an idea that they'll only stay for a year or so and end up falling in love with place. And more importantly, the place falls in love with them. And to nurture that and to deepen the roots is what we're all about.
Look at our circle and let's become part of the design. How can we have equidistant space between the design there and our bodies so we're matching? I feel like we need to go back a bit over there.
For me, I think that being able to use place as a way to teach science, for example. So you have all these science standards that you have to cover in a year, right? And I teach kindergarten, and so a lot of those science standards are focused around animals and learning about animal habitats and adaptations, and so that's a really wonderful example of how you can do all of that through, well, what animals have you noticed before, right? Like what have you seen with your family before? What have you heard about? And then diving deeper into that and kind of asking kids what they've experienced or the connections they have to it, and then using that to then spur what information you share with them. And there's so many people here who have stories with this animal or that animal, and so you can then take those stories and those connections that kids have and use them as a way to introduce a little bit more. Give them another question to ask, like, well, why do you think squirrels are, always being so chattery or whatever, whatever it is, right? Like, it gives you an entrance, and I think that's a perfect example of place-based education, right? You're using those connections that students have to their own experience or to somebody else that they know's experience, and that's how we learn, is making those connections. I feel like I've heard that.
As far as transforming Western education, I think that simply needs to be accomplished by the individual. I think that when we have standards, when we have objectives that are imposed on us by people who live 3,000 miles away, instead of working towards those objectives and working towards those goals, as difficult as it might sound, I think the answer is to use those, to view those goals and objectives and standards as the beginning, as the starting place. So we get that done, and then we go on and we enrich those lessons by the relevance that they offer to us by the context of where we live.
JAM is a music program for social change, so we're always looking at what are the community needs. And so when Hune mentioned that in Hawaii, they've been able to turn it around. There's so many schools that have immersions, Hawaiian immersion schools, but we just can't seem to change it here. And he said that the argument has been for Juneau schools is that how are you going to teach Tlingit in geometry, chemistry, when there are no words for it? And he said, well, you would do like any language, you create it, just like unfriend from Facebook. We just haven't been at the table for 100 years.
Oh, well, this is the Teo Asidi A TAD, where you put your chin. A ute, it's a sweet little, what's known as a little button, but it's the little sucker on like a squid or octopus. And that's the little button down there. Yud ze achjawut, where the sound comes out. Tlekt itayi, the place you put your fingers, the fingerboard. Kwasua, the that fern scroll of the fern as it just begins up in the springtime. I love that it is a springtime instrument. I'm sure that all the seasons work, but I think of it as a good beginning. Yeah.
And what's so beautiful about the Tlingit language is that it's a metaphor for something that already exists on Tlingit Ani. So now we don't have to say G, we can just say the color, like charcoal, katuj, or like hemlock bark, katzakwat, or like a small bird who happens to be yellow, katat. And then kids love this one because it's like a baby seagull, katlawach. And it's actually helped our program, our violin program, improve, because then we put them on the ek yit ayi, and the kids, it's like a one-to-one correspondence. All of our music is now written with these colors, and it brings the music to life, to look at a piece of music and see these colors and shapes, and they're instantly seeing things that they find, on this land that are a part of of where we live. I think it's just beautiful to see something that we've seen very abstract deepen and have so much life to it. The Tlingit language is tonal, so it makes sense to be using music to even mimic the melody of the speech as ways of teaching. And of course, we would never do any of this alone without the support of culture bearers, language scholars, and so that's where George came in.
Well, on a personal note, when I started writing music in my mid-20s, it was really to help open up worlds that had to do with my own language. And so I used the language, used music in order to build intangibles and to relate to the language in all different ways. And I found that was an effective way to experience the language. And it works for kids too. So it's just this natural fit that I feel like our paths have joined up. And to hear the language radiating out from the heart of a school, it's really exciting. I really feel like there's a little sun that is being born in the mouth of these kids each day, and it's going to get brighter and brighter.
And your voices were shining from above. Rather than reaching for it, you were shining down. It was beautiful, just beautiful.
Yeah, that brings beauty. Mm-hmm. And okay.
This is going to be the bow.
Yigush akawa. Sucks. Yan ye gasane. Sucks. Sunday. Sucks Hyundai. Our ancestors placed it within us. What do we keep? Hey, what? It is within their remains as this sapling.
Well, when we were first thinking about it a couple of years ago, about some of the ways that we can come together even more closely, one of the understandings that we came to is that of course, and it was already in place when we joined, in that everyone needs to fellowship and have refreshments and show up hungry and eat together. And beyond that, we invite children. If the teachers have their children nearby, and let's bring children and friends and visitors. Let's open it for everyone and make it more of a community gathering rather than a teaching space, because I believe that the way to become rooted in place is to build community, to feel your community and understand you belong there. It doesn't have to be, I'm real social and I join groups and so on. It doesn't have to be that. It's sufficient simply to know that there are other people who feel the same way you do, and that's community. A couple of weeks ago, although I had sworn I would never leave Juneau again, and I'd broken that promise anyway by going over to Perseverance and watching things. So I was invited to New Jersey, and I thought, well, I've already broken my promise. What the heck? I might as well go clear across the country. And I traveled to Princeton campus in New Jersey to speak at a symposium on what was once termed Tlingit artifacts that have been under Princeton's control since the 19th century and remain so. As part of the week-long visit, I found myself at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. On the way to the new Northwest Coast Hall, we walked past Ocean Life, the Hall of Mammals, the Hall of Primates, and past stuffed tigers and stuffed bears. Finally, we reached the large space where our own things once called artifacts and now called magnificent examples of Pacific Northwest Coast material culture are displayed in glass boxes for the entertainment and education of all the bored people casually strolling by. Well, this is our first assembly here at the library for this 2023-24 series of artful teaching. Tonight we're going to introduce ourselves and reacquaint ourselves. We have been building community for a few years of teachers and librarians and their families and children and other interested artists and teaching artists and educators, so that we form a community that is rooted in place, so that our theme and our goal of place-based teaching by place-based teachers is more easily accomplished.
I don't know if they are. Maybe this is already equipped somewhere.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. I wonder if any of mine that I made are in here. I made resin ones too.
Just flattening out the paper right now so that we can draw on it. We're gonna here's the last again.
So what are we gonna? What do we do now?
So you're gonna take your template. You're just gonna lay it on top.
Okay.
Get as close to the edges as possible as you can, and then take the guard off.
And when you're tracing it, you have to try not to get the little.
Yeah, it's a straight
in it.
line, so the notches aren't gonna be there.
It should be straight, not
Yeah.
Yeah,
dented.
don't go over
right.
any of the notches.
This is a collaboration between Sealaska Heritage and Cook Inlet Tribal Council, and through their collaboration and their artists, we've learned how to make Tanah, and as we've learned about the Tanah, we've taken a look at the history of the Tanah, we've taken a look at where the copper came from and historical trade routes, and we've got the state librarian who's been emailing us all these amazing articles and artifacts about the Tanah. We've taken pictures down at the State Museum, Library and Archives here in Juneau, and so we're learning about this very unique cultural symbol that has existed for hundreds of years.
Oh, I found it!
Now, as you're creating form line, what did I say? Should you have a super complex form line design that you're gonna cut out? No. What are we looking for? Simple as that. We might not be a traditional library in terms of how libraries are structured, but we are learning, I would say maybe even more traditional in that we're learning from beyond where libraries were even in existence, where this would have been very natural. This would have been a natural learning environment for a Tlingit student who's learning from an auntie or an uncle, and so creating a unique space that's even better, and then incorporating that knowledge that we can bring in from the library, like photographic evidence, like artifacts and articles from the state in the state library. So we're taking all those things and combining them into a very place-based project. And traditional knowledge and cultural bearer knowledge and elder knowledge all comes together. And so that's exactly what the school library is meant to do. And that's also trying to create a room for inquiry and inquiry-based learning. So with inquiry, the students can start asking those questions. So that's what our goal is, to spark that curiosity in them. And our school's kind of mission is question, create, achieve, and so we're definitely fulfilling those aspects of our mission where we're learning to question and then make the creations and then achieving through what we're learning. So this is just a really good space to have that in, and no, we're not necessarily a quiet. You're not going to see me shush kids in the library very often, maybe during testing, but not on projects like this.
I wanted to ask, what's your favorite part in doing the Tinas?
I really like making the tea. That's like,
Oh, yeah.
it's really fun. You just get to sit there with like a chisel and,
Yeah?
but I don't know. The bowl is probably my least favorite part because it's really specific. Bowl. Well, I guess compared to like other places that you see, obviously, on like social media, like in the schools, you don't see that. But like walking down our hallways, like there's the core values are on these big Tana shaped boards on our side, and it like tells stories about different people. We've always had like elders come in and they'll teach us how to do like weaving, or they'll read us stories, and it's always been our normal. Like since kindergarten even, we'd have like someone's mom would come in and they'd sit up at the front of the class and read us like our classroom story time that were just traditional stories that they had given into books and that were always in our libraries, and that's kind of our normal.
The model of education that we're trying to achieve, and it's really difficult because we are kind of set up for that older model of education, is going back to where an auntie or an uncle would have taken the child and taught the student and brought them along and had them observe them and watch them and see and learn and then start asking questions and build and grow. And it's so much more natural than sit in your desk, take out your notebook, get ready to learn today. I'm going to put things on the board. You're going to write down what I put on the board, and then you're going to remember everything that I put on the board. That is not the traditional model of education. The truly traditional model of education goes back thousands of years, and to where an elder or culture bearer and auntie uncle would take the student and teach them and show them and have them observe in a meaningful way. And as we're learning like that, it's dynamic.
There is no doubt that those of you who stand with Indigenous nations will push every door, will open every window, will attend every event, fight and fight again and again until the people of Tlingit Ani, all of us people of Tlingit Ani can turn to each other and say of those own things that carry the spirit of ancestors that were touched by the hands of those we still respect and love, they're coming home. Until that time, all of us here continue to shift the way we see things, our views of culture, of living things, of education, and of one another. We strive to see the world through a different lens, through our shared human lens, and we decolonize. We smash the patriarchy. We undo capitalism. We condemn racism. We resist. Gonna teach. Thank you.
This program was made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.